Hey there, everyone. I'm Vicki Howell, and this is Ask Me Monday. And I'm really excited about this week's episode. I completely pivoted what my original plan was for this week after my family and I spent Thanksgiving weekend binge watching Netflix's Wednesday. So, for those of you who may not be familiar, Wednesday is a breakout show of the character Wednesday from the Addams Family, and it is created and directed by one of my favorites, Tim Burton. And so we just have had such a blast. We watched all 8 episodes, and not only did we enjoy it just for the show's sake, I was also thrilled to see that there was a lot of knitting and crocheting represented in it. I posted a couple of shots on Instagram. I have a knit spotting highlight on my feed. There's a vest that is amazing. Wednesday's whole vibe in this one was black and white. I mean, it was always black and white, but they really played with stripes and checkers and patterns in it. And there's a vest that I'm obsessed with that I might try to recreate a cropped version of. But her roommate, without giving anything away, her roommate is the polar opposite of her. She's all about bright colors and fun, and she's really sort of effervescent. And she's also a crocheter. So for Wednesday's birthday, she made her a gift. And there's a really funny exchange about what it is, and it is a snood. So I couldn't resist. Right then, I made it happen. Right then, I dropped what I was doing, and I was like, I've got to make this happen. So a snood is basically a super wide cowl that can be worn. You can make them short or long. I did like a midi version here. The intent of it is to be both neck warmer and sort of like a hood. And so she made, Enid, the best friend roommate, made it in Wednesday's palette, which is the one that I made. But I also swatched for Enid's palette. Enid loves color, as I mentioned before. And so I went this route too. So you could make either palette or create your own. This is a really simple crochet pattern. So if you're new to crochet, this is a really good project. But I'm going to show you how to make this. So I'll talk supplies in a second, but first, as usual, I would love to hear what you spent your holiday weekend making. I just love to hear about the projects that you're working on. So it doesn't have to be knit or crochet. It could be any form of crafting or writing, any form of creativity. I just want to hear about it. And as always, if you've got a pattern or project link to share, we would love to see it. All right. For me, you already know what I worked on. You may notice I'm actually wearing knitwear today, which never happens because I just never have time to make garments. This was actually made by my best friend for herself, and she didn't like how it looked on her, so I benefited from it. So it's super cozy. I don't know. I think she adapted a kid's pattern. We're both petite. We're both short gals, and so she adapted a kid's pattern. All right, let's talk supplies. So for this project, I'll talk yarn in a second. This episode, as in most of our episodes, is brought to you thanks to the long-term support of Knitter's Pride or Knit Pro, depending where you are. They have just been so wonderful over the past few years, and I will be using their hooks. You can use any type of hook that you like. For some projects, a particular shaped hook matters. I don't feel like it does for this one. We're really just working in simple double crochet stitches. They've got some great ones. They're gingers, the Symphony Dreams, which are shaped exactly the same, but they're in a different color for every size. They've got their waves, and then their zing set. They've got sets for all of them, but I like all of them for this. You'll see in part of the video, I'm using a version that they made for me for my line in aqua, which is essentially the same as the gingers. Whatever makes you happy. I will say that if I had the right size, I used a size K. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. If I had the right size, I would have gone thematic with a hook that I think Wednesday would have approved of. Well, if Wednesday lowered herself to craft, which she would have approved of, which are the Knitter's Pride steel hooks, black, silver. I think that that would be an excellent choice if you're making that version. If you're making the Enid version, I mean, go Symphony Dreams, go Waves. There's color. Have fun with it. All right. So then for the yarn, what I did what I had. I'm actually in my home studio and not in the Yarnier studios today, so I don't have samples really to show you, but I used my Montoya Merino. This is an Aran weight / heavy worsted, just a single strand. It took almost 3 hanks of this. Well, 2 and probably a quarter hanks. You need about 220 grams of Aran weight or worsted weight yarn. I used, the color is Briquette, this is black. I also used some of this color, which is White Sands, but just for the tassels. I wouldn't recommend spending the money to get a whole like nice superwash merino extra hank of yarn just for the tassels. Use whatever white you have around for this. So that's that. And you can find that yarn. I've linked to it from the post with this pattern at vickihowell.com, but you can also just find it in my Yarnier shop. For the Enid version, this was not as direct of a translation. I wanted to catch the sort of spirit. In the show, hers is more of a stripy version. It's very hard to see any of these because the palette of the overall show is always dark. But I decided to go with a multicolor that didn't require a bunch of ends to be woven in. So I don't have both colors here with me, but I double stranded. So for this one, I used a sport weight. This is my Montoya Merino Light. It was in color Meow Wolf, and the other color that you can see here is Blushed Adobe. I held them together and worked with them at the same time, and they produced almost exactly the same gauge as the Aran. So that was an easy swap out. Now that I've told you what I made, I will say you could pretty much use any weight yarn, any type of yarn. I mean, I would use a acrylic or a wool blend just for the drape for this, but really you could do whatever you've got. I've written the pattern at vickihowell.com in a manner that gauge doesn't really matter. I've just told you, how many foundation double crochets, which I will show you in a minute, to make to get the 60 inches that I recommend for the circumference. If you are a taller or a bigger person, or if you prefer more drape around your neck, I would go to 72 inches, but again, it's easy to adapt, and that's in the pattern. So you could go, just make sure that you get the hook size to correspond with your yarn. If you wanted to go crazy and wanted to make the Enid one and you were feeling like you wanted to treat yourself on some fancy yarn, I also have these 2 colors in the Yarnier shop right now of Mad Tosh ASAP. I designed a whole collection of ASAP gifts, so check that out. They're all 1 hank, 1 evening gifts. But these 2 colors together very much look in the realm of what Enid was wearing in the episode. It's episode 6, by the way, that this is in. And this is a bulky weight, so you would go a bigger hook, but you would need, I'm guessing that you would probably need 3 hanks of this as well. But that's just a guess. You might be able to get away with 2 because of the bigger gauge, but I didn't make it in that, so roll the dice. But I have both of these colors. This is Mars in Retrograde, and this is Copper Pink. So if you're interested, that's all the yarn scoop. So basically get some yarn, corresponding hook, and we'll get started. All right. In this tutorial, I am going to show you how to do foundation double crochets. I'm going to remind you how to double crochet in case you need a little refresher. I'm going to show you how to seam the 2 ends together to make this sort of infinity shape, and then we'll talk tassels. And that, my friends, is it. Okay, let's get started. To get started on this snood, you will be using foundation double crochets, and what that'll do is it'll create a nice edging that is the same stretchiness, I guess is the word. It drapes the same as your end. With traditional chains, and when you're working with a long piece this way, what can happen is that just a regular traditional chain stitch is a tighter gauge than a double crochet, and so you can end up getting sort of a rainbow effect, which works for some projects but isn't great for this particular one. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating our chain and the first row of DCs, although this is just considered a setup row, at the same time. I'm using just a random color. This is Montoya Merino. Okay, so you're going to start with a chain 3. Okay, from here, we're going to be working into what I call the nose of the stitch. It just tends to tighten it up a little bit better than working through the front of the stitch, but you could actually do both. I've just found it's a little bit cleaner. We're going to yarn over as if to double crochet, and you insert the hook in that loop. Then you're going to yarn over and pull that through so you've established your space. Okay, so here is where the magic happens. Now you're going to chain 1, so yarn over, pull through. That's going to count as your actual chain row, and then you work your double crochet. So right there you've created your chain, your foundation chain, and your double crochet at the same time. So from here on out you're not working with any chains which would be vertical chains. You're going to be working in the back of the chain from before. So again, you can work through this loop through the front of the chain, but I've found that the loops get very tend to be a little large if you go that route. So if you go through what looks like a little nose, oops, I need to yarn over, pull the loop through. From here I chain 1, and then I complete my double crochet. So you can see here, I've got 3 foundation double crochets with the chain at the bottom. And so you'll just continue doing this until you have 120 stitches if you have the exact gauge that I am. But you could also just work them until you get to 60 inches, which is another benefit of going this route. And that gives you a little flexibility with what yarn you use. All right, that's it for the foundation double crochet. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so the bulk of, or the entire body of this snood is made with simple double crochet, so DCs. So to do that, you start the row. To create the height, you need to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And that gets you to the height of the row. And ordinarily, I would not be teaching using black yarn, but in the spirit of Wednesday, we went with it. But I also will post a link of another just straight up double crochet tutorial that I've done in the past on YouTube. If this is problematic for you, you can go there. Okay, so now that we're at the height, we can start working our double crochets. So again, with the black, this is going to be a little bit difficult. We're going to be working under both loops of the stitch. So you can see, if I put it on my aqua hook, you can see there's 2 loops. All right, so we're going to yarn over, insert under the stitch, and pull a loop through. And that gets you established to your next place. So from here, it's called a double crochet because you're going to make 2 passes through 2 loops. And I'm using American terms. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And that is all you're going to do in every stitch to the end for your entire piece. You'll start every row the same way with a chain 3, and you'll work this row again and again and again. It is super simple, and like I said earlier, we'll work with mostly any yarn, depending on the drape that you like. I, of course, again, am using a combination of Montoya Merino and Montoya Merino Light. I ran out halfway through and was feeling lazy and didn't want to go to the studio, so I double-stranded Montoya Merino Light, and it ends up being the same gauge as my Montoya Merino Aran heavy worsted. All right, and that is all there is for this part. Okay, once you have your piece as wide as the pattern calls for, or as wide as you'd like it, you're going to finish up your last row, but don't fasten off. Instead, we're just going to go ahead and seam it to make it a sort of oversized cowl or infinity scarf. So we're just going to go end to end. This is a reversible pattern, so it doesn't really matter which side you're on. And then we're just going to single crochet together. Now, if you're working through a chain, you kind of just have to eyeball it. And you're going to be working down the side, so it's not going to be stitch to stitch as if you were working long end to long end. So since we're doing short end to short end, we're working up the rows, and we are just going to kind of work evenly. So you just wiggle waggle through. These two loops will just count as one, so you'll pull through both and then finish your single crochet. And you just want to make sure that you're checking every once in a while to make sure that the piece is even. You could even pin it or use some clips to hold it together just to ensure that happens. Or you can go rogue like I am here. So you're just going to do that all the way across. And sometimes you have to help it through, especially because I'm working through multiple strands. And what this will do is this will join it. And on the other side, it'll look like this. You could also, if you don't want to single crochet, you could slip stitch it. It'll just be a little bit of a tighter seam. So just make sure you go nice and loose so it doesn't bunch. Or you could skip the crochet portion of this altogether, cut off a long tail, and whip stitch or mattress stitch it with a tapestry needle. And that will take care of creating the body portion of your snood. All right, next up, we are going to make our tassels for our snood. There are tons of ways to do it. You should make them any way that makes you happy. There's all these really fancy tools that can help. Or in a pinch, you can just use your smartphone. I do this all the time when I find myself in the sudden need for a tassel, and you'd be surprised how often that is. And I don't have a tassel maker with me. So you're just going to wrap. I've double stranded the yarn. It doesn't really matter, but I wanted these two colors. And you'll just wrap until it's the thickness that you want. I'm using a Aran weight yarn, and I'm going around, I don't know, maybe 16 times. Then you lay it down and you cut your yarn. And then you get a strand. I recommend using whatever color is the main color of your piece. So for the Wednesday version, it would be black. And you just want a strand long enough that you can tie it onto your snood later. I would say about 6 inches is plenty. And then you want to just slide it under all of the strands that you've wound around your smartphone. And by the way, a piece of cardboard would work perfectly well if you don't want to use your phone. And then you want to tie a knot, just a plain old knot, but just as snug as you can get it. If you have a friend, you can have them put their finger down and hold it, or you can use your own. And that's that. Okay, then we need to cut the bottom. You could either slide it off first and then do it, or cut it this way. It's a little bit easier to get it relatively even doing it this way. And now you'll have this little monster right here. And then from here, we just need to create the little top, the little head of the tassel. So you can either cut a separate strand, or often what I'll do is I'll just take one of the strands that's already there and wrap it around about, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of an inch, doesn't really matter, from the top till it's nice and snug. And you might have to tug at the tails a little. And then you pick another strand in the back. Doesn't really matter which one. And you're going to tie that snugly as well. And again, I'm just using plain old knots. So do that a couple times. And then you can trim it, or you can just bury it. And then once you're done with that, you want to trim it so it's nice and even, and also whatever size you want. And that'll do it. And then from there, we're just going to tie them directly on to our snood. You could also use a needle and sew them on, but this seemed easy to me. It's on the inside so nobody else see it. You can give it a little trim. And just repeat for as many tassels as you want. I'm not entirely sure, because it was so dark, where these were placed. In one seam it looked like they were sporadic, and another seam, and they were probably two different pieces, that looked like they were lined up around here. I kind of like the sporadic because once you're wearing it, it won't feel like you're being overtaken by tassels, but have fun and play with it. All right, super easy and so fun. Can we take a moment for my matching tassel earrings to go with the tassels on this? These were actually made by a really great designer. Her name is Rachel, but I digress. All right, so you see how to make it. I would love it if you would share yours when you make them in any colors. I know this time of the year, not everybody likes black. Me and Wednesday have that in common, but you can really do, any colors that you like. This is a really great gift idea. Like I said, I made it in, I started one day and was done by the next. So I want to say that it probably was under 6 hours maybe. So there's plenty of time to make one for your bestie or for family members, and just have fun with it. I hope you enjoyed this episode and you've enjoyed Netflix's Wednesday. Not at all an ad. They don't know nothing about me. I just like to share the joy whenever I have found it. All right, have a great rest of your week. Please share this video if you know anybody that would be interested in an episode of Ask Me Monday or in the Wednesdays Snood in particular. There are also another 240 something episodes that you can find on my website, vickyhowell.com. Click on videos and the drop down. And so, yeah, that's all I got. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you on the next episode of Ask Me Monday.